Thank you for joining us, Minister. My first question is, we know that the federal government wants to reduce spending on the National Disability Insurance Scheme by $15.3 billion over the next 4 years. Can you outline how that's going to happen?
Well, great to be on your show, Claude, and thank you very much for inviting me. The first thing I want to do is just, language is important, and I wanted to say to all the people listening who might be on the scheme or love someone on the scheme, the NDIS is here to stay. When we say reduce spending, what I think we can do is make sure that every dollar gets through to the person for whom the scheme was set up. So we're going to still spend nearly $200 billion over the next 4 years. I just don't think we need to spend an extra $15 billion above that. But every year under our plans, we're going to spend more and help more participants than the previous year. But I think there are some areas of, waste is probably a good collective way to put it. I'd like to have better planning decisions made by the NDIS. That stops a whole lot of grief, turmoil and red tape. I'd like to have longer term planning. A lot of people, about 70% of the scheme have annual plans. That's just like a whole lot of trauma and anxiety each year to reprove your case. But if we had 5-year plans with appropriate safeguards and flexibility, then all of a sudden it's not an annual trauma fest. I'm keen to eliminate unethical conduct. I just want to run the frauds out. There are people who overcharge people with disability. I don't think there's anything much worse than ripping off a person with a disability in their family, but that is happening in the scheme right now. A lot of service providers good, but some shonks.
Like you just mentioned, Minister, in terms of price gouging, because we've heard from people already that this is this huge problem.
It is,
and people are really disgusted by it.
Yeah.
We actually had Liz from Instagram. She's written in and said, for last minute cancellation, my daughter's physio charges $50 fee unless you're with the NDIS. Then they'll charge the full therapy session fee. I've seen those changes out there myself. Like, how is that even legal?
Well, it shouldn't be legal, but currently it is.
Are you going to make it illegal?
I want to.
Okay, how
I think
does
it
that
should
work?
be illegal. Well, there's a couple of mechanisms. One is I'd like the ACCC, that's the Australian Competition Commission, to start providing advice on how we can stop people just being opportunistic in their behaviour. That's probably the best way I can think of to make it illegal. But also, I just want to discourage it. Like, why should a person... We've got to educate some of the service providers that just because a person has an NDIS package doesn't make them a multimillionaire, and it doesn't mean that they think that they can simply replace the money that gets gouged from the government. Like, it's not on. Just treat everyone the same. If you've got a cancellation, it doesn't cost you more if you're not seeing a disabled person. Like, it's just rubbish, isn't it? So we want to make it illegal wherever I possibly can.
And in terms of that price gouging, where if you've just joined us, someone's charged more for a service or equipment if they're on the NDIS compared to if they're not, would you be open to looking at, price controls or things like that to kind of ensure that doesn't happen?
We do currently have a cap on what can be charged per hour on a range of things, but I don't think that consumers feel empowered enough. So that's one thing, give more information to consumers about where they can shop around. But I also think there should be a stronger regulatory framework just to say to companies and businesses, you can't do it. You just can't do it.
Yeah, right. So that would be like the ACCC, which is the consumer watchdog. If you're not familiar with them, that would give them more powers potentially to crack down on this sort of thing.
We're in discussions with them right now as to how we can improve the situation. But one thing's for sure, the status quo is unacceptable. And that's what I meant earlier, going back to your earlier question. The first question you asked me is, well, you say you're going to save some money. What does this all mean? We're going to spend more money than ever, but I just want to make sure that the money's not going to the wrong people.
So, Minister, we've had a question from Solstice, and they've asked, will you adjust budgets for current plans that are in place or require plans to be redone? Also, what about budgeting around carer support? Are there going to be any changes there?
On carer support, we've obviously passed on the wage increases that have been issued by the independent umpire on Australian workers' wages. So all the disability carers' wages are going up. So that's good for them. They're not paid a king's ransom. We're talking about 25 and 30 and 35 bucks an hour. So that's good. They're going to get a pay rise. In terms of plans, that's still an individual process. What we intend to do is invest in the capacity of the agency. They're the people, the National Disability Insurance Agencies you mentioned, they administer the scheme. So eventually, when a person comes on, they get an individual plan. We want to make sure that the planners are as resourced as possible, with as much knowledge as possible, to be able to get that plan right initially with the participant and their families. Once you get that initial plan right, then hopefully things will be more smooth sailing. Moving to longer plans doesn't mean that we won't support. If you have a 5-year plan, it doesn't mean that we won't, or that we'll rule out variations. If it turns out the plan's not quite right, that's fine.
Okay, so people can come and kind of ask for a review. So if their life's changed.
What's happening at the moment, though, is the annual plan is becoming a traumatic process. Anxiety, and it also focuses everyone on get the money, keep the money. In the last month, I better spend the money so that I can get the same money. It's just creating the wrong incentives in the system. A lot of reports get written. It's also a bit dehumanising for people with permanent disabilities to every year have to say, yep, I'm still blind, yep, I'm still a quadriplegic, yep, I still have, serious autism. Like, let's not dehumanise a person. Let's not pretend every day's Groundhog Day, that you've got to keep telling the same story again.
We've had a few questions come in about that, because I'm glad you mentioned that, because we've had Fiona write in and she says, I'm sick of having to pay for reports every year to keep proving my children's disability. And so what would the timeline be on something like that to see those changes come into place?
Oh, we want to do co-design and how we roll it out. We want to make sure that there's no point replacing one set of anxieties, trauma with another set. So co-design's fundamental to what we do, but I'm optimistic that we can roll out longer term plans, start rolling them out in the next 12 months.
Okay. So when, we might check back in with you a year from now and see how that's all going.
I'm happy to talk to you every month.
Oh, great. Oh, okay, cool. Well, thank you for saying that on camera, Minister, because we might take you off on it.
I love talking about the NDIS and listening to people.
So just one more question for you, Minister, on that, because in terms of that length between reviews, the whole idea is that these reviews, can be put in place so that when people's circumstances change, just so everyone knows, it's going to be possible for a participant to drive that process. And you mentioned before too, there's real concern when people come up for these reviews that their money's going to be cut if they don't use it all. I guess
I want to say that's
what's your message?
I want to say loud and clear, don't spend the money just because you feel you have to spend the money. It's if you've got a certain annual package, under this government, there's no automatic reduction by the amount that you don't spend. So we just want people to move away from this sort of... People's lives are not a 12-month bookkeeping exercise. Don't you love it when Officeworks say it's end of financial year sale, spend your budget? That's a general thing, not about NDIS. Well, we want to remove that. Like, my whole aim with the scheme when I helped create it is you've got to put the individual in control of their own resources. I think the best person to make a decision about their life is that person.